Okay, thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. I am Emmy Henley, the Managing Director of the Reform Alliance. Before I introduce our guests, I want to again remind everyone that you can use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to ask any questions during the call. And then if your question is not answered tonight, you can email our office at info@thereformalliance.org. And then I am joined tonight by Dr. Darrell Smith. He is the Assistant Commissioner at the Arkansas Department of Education and the Program Administrator for the Education Freedom Account Program. And then I'm also joined by Dr. Patrick Wolf, who is a Distinguished Professor of Education Policy and the 21st Century Endowed Chair in School Choice in the Department of Education Reform at the University of Arkansas. So you guys are very important people. Is there anything that you guys would like to add before we get started with the questions?
No,
I think let's just get rolling.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, perfect. So, Dr. Wolf, we'll start with you. You study programs like the Educational Freedom Account all over the country. What is your assessment of the reaction to this new program? What are people saying outside of Arkansas in terms of the passing, designing, and implementation of this program?
Sure, Emmy. Most of what I'm getting from my friends in other states is envy. They ask me, how did Arkansas implement such an ambitious and exciting education savings account program that's going to grow to universal eligibility very quickly and do so in such a short period of time? And the simple answer I give them is we had a very smart and energetic new governor who came into office having run on education reform and proposed a very exciting package of reforms in the form of the Learns Act. And she built a very strong team around her and had great support by our state legislative leaders, and also importantly, grassroots organizations in the state, including the Reform Alliance, which had great experience building support for parental empowerment through choice. So it all really came together in a very exciting way this spring. And folks in Louisiana and Tennessee and Missouri and Pennsylvania, they're all asking, how can we be like Arkansas?
That is amazing. Well, I know that we at the Reform Alliance are excited to see this grow. Like you mentioned, we were a part of the Succeed Scholarship from the very beginning to until it rolled into the EFA program. So we are thrilled that more families are able to participate in this. And then Dr. Smith, how is the EFA program going so far? Like what sort of participation do you have? Are families still able to apply right now if they wanted to enroll at semester? And would they still be able to get that funding?
Absolutely. We've had a great start this year. We've had over almost 6,000 applications submitted, which has been actually amazing considering we didn't really launch it till June 19th of this year. So it was a great start. We've approved about 5,500 applications, and we funded about 5,000 of those through the class wallet as far as distribution and allocation. So we've had a really good start. The application process is still open because we know that as families are looking and trying to make the right choices for their families and for their children, that sometimes they make a choice and maybe it didn't quite work out the way they thought it might, and so they want to switch, take different opportunities. So because of that, we were leaving the application process open, or maybe they didn't know about it because really everything launched in the summer. And so because of that, maybe they're just now trying to hear, just hearing a little bit about it. So application process is still open. They can still apply up through probably first couple of weeks in January, right after that second semester of school starts. And then at that point, we'll probably close it down for this school year and get ready for the next school year.
Okay, perfect. So you said you've approved around 5,500 applications. How many does that leave open for this school year?
It's approximately 1,500. The law says that we can do about 1.5% of the student population of Arkansas. And so that's about 6,500 applications or funding spots. And so it's about 1,500. So we still got a little room.
That's amazing. Yeah, very exciting. So we have families here who are participating in the EFA program, as well as many families who are interested in participating in the future. For those who aren't in the program, can you give us a brief overview of what's required to participate and what makes their child eligible right now?
Absolutely. So 23, 24. So this school year and next year, there's a fairly limited eligibility requirement, and then it follows into universal, as far as universal eligibility in the 25-26 school year. So this school year, you have to have an identified IDEA disability, either they're an IEP or a doctor's note that says that, you know, there's a verified disability, homeless, foster care, active military, we're enrolled in an F-rated school or level 5 district in the 22-23 school year, or a first year kindergarten. So that takes care of this year. So if you meet one of those criteria, then you can still apply for this year and receive funding for the school of your choice, as long as it's an approved school. That expands into next year, and it goes in. So military veterans, reservists, first responders, law enforcement, D or F rated school. So if this year you're attending a D or F rated school, or in a level 5 district, you would qualify for next year.
Okay, so those eligibility requirements expand next year. And then how can they use the funds? Because I know that I think there are some changes between this year and next year.
Absolutely, yes. So this year, basically pretty limited. It's tuition, fees, uniforms, and required supplies. Those are pretty much what you could spend for this year. Next year, though, that expands quite a bit. Next year, you get into instructional and supplemental materials, education service providers, testing, curriculum, course fees, technology devices, transportation costs. That's a lot of one thing people don't really recognize a lot, but transportation to and from education service providers or some things like that. So that's pretty much where it'll stay. So once we get in past this next year and beyond, those are the categories. Again, just to repeat them: instructional and supplemental materials, educational services and tutoring, curriculum, course and exam fees, educational service providers, technology devices, and transportation costs.
Perfect. That's amazing. Will children that are already enrolled this year be prioritized for enrollment the following year?
Well, if you're in the program, you're in the program. So you don't get out of the program. So once you're in the program, you're there. We are going to ask those that are in the program now, so if they want to still be in the program next year. So every year you have to kind of re-up. You know, you don't have to reapply necessarily, but you do have to renew it and just let us know that you still want to be a part of the program. So every year we'll be adding more and more students into the program.
Okay, perfect. And then on that same note, will there be a cap on the number of students that are able to receive funding in the next school year? So for 24-25?
So this year it's 1.5% is the cap. Next year it's 3%. So that, again, about what, 13,000 or so students would be eligible for next year. And then once we get, again, 25-26, then everybody who's a resident of Arkansas and eligible to attend a public school will be could be part of the EFA program.
Okay, perfect. That's very exciting. And then just to clarify, this is a K-12 program, correct? So preschool and college students do not qualify for any kind of funding.
That is correct. And just a little caveat on that K-12. So the law states that you have to be eligible for public school to participate in the EFA program. Kindergartners, based on the state law, you have to be 5 by August 1st. So if you're one of those kind of late birthdays, mid-August, August 5th, August 6th, unfortunately, you'd have to wait a year to be part of the program.
Okay, perfect. That is good to know. I was like, I have a son that was born in late August. So
One more year.
How long does it take to get approval once an application is submitted? Do you guys have like a timeline for that?
Some of that kind of depends on the time of year. If we're in a really busy, like when the application's open, it may take a week or so to get those things done. Right now, we can probably do it in a couple days, and a lot of that again depends on the documentation that they present, the evidence of the eligibility requirements. And so, as long as we have all the documentation and we can approve it and look at it and know what it is and verify it, that it doesn't take that long.
Okay, perfect. And then this is a very popular program, so we got a lot of questions about this.
That's okay.
Will families with one enrolled child, so if they have a child in the program this year, have any guarantee of their second or third child being accepted in coming years when they get to kindergarten?
At this time, we're going to, try to get as many kids in there as we can, so that we don't really have a sibling rule in the rules at this point.
Mhm.
I think the intent of the law and the intent of the Learns Act is that every parent who wants to choose, an educational option for their kid will have that opportunity. And so at this time, everybody who wants to be in it's going to be in it.
Okay, perfect. Um, so while the allowed uses expand next year and students will still have to qualify based on the eligibility criteria that you described, correct, for this year and then next year. And then families can't qualify based on how they want to spend the EFA funds, correct? Like we have a lot of questions about homeschool expenses.
Yeah, so the eligible expenses are what they've done. They're pretty broad and they're pretty general at this point, and that's purposeful because we know that there's a lot of educational options, and we want to give families as many options as we possibly can. Homeschool students aren't directly mentioned in the Learns Act, but the eligible expenses is what allows them to be part of that program, and as far as what they can spend their money on. Um, it's not a reimbursable program, so we're not paying money to a parent to buy things or to get things. It's a program where you're basically saying, this is what I want. They produce an invoice that says, this is what I've got, whether it's a tutoring invoice or an invoice for some, maybe a special device or something of that nature, or tuition. And then at that point, we approve the invoice, which then is a direct pay to that particular provider.
Okay, all right, good to know. So 2 years from now, every child in Arkansas will become eligible for this program. The allowed expenses change from this year to next year, and then they don't expand again according to the Learns Act, correct?
That is correct. There may be a few little caveats in there, but for the most part, what happens next year is where we're going to be.
Okay, and then in 25-26, when every K-12 student in Arkansas is eligible, do you have any idea of what kind of paperwork they'll have to submit for their eligibility?
So the law says that in the 25-26, that basically you have to be a resident of Arkansas, and your student has to be eligible to participate in to attend and or be enrolled in public school. So we'll be looking for some type of residency requirement, utility bill, a driver's license, something that verifies where you live, and then something like a birth certificate that would verify age of the student and that they're eligible to participate or enroll in the public school system.
Okay. Sounds fairly easy, something that everyone will have pretty much on hand.
That's the goal. That's the goal.
So because our organization is very focused on students and decisions that put students first, I would like to ask what the EFA participation requires of the student. What's required of them to participate in the program once they're already accepted?
Absolutely. So basically, the requirements are more for for this first year are for the school. That the school has to provide testing, one of a norm reference test for every student that participates in the EFA, and then that testing results have to come back to the state, and we'll aggregate it all and kind of tell the story from there. If you're a homeschool parent or you're doing it through a service provider, that requirement's still there. You still have to provide testing results every spring regarding kind of where you're at in the process. So you take a norm reference test, send it into the state. So that's the main requirement that's for EFA participants. As
Okay.
well as just being not enrolled in a public school, I guess. You can't be enrolled in public school.
Yes. So, and you mentioned the homeschool students having the testing and everything, but they can pick their test from an approved list.
Yeah, so there are a number of really good norm reference tests. I think we have like 17 or 18 on the website that we've already approved, and so any of those would be fine. We are working right now with department. The state's getting ready to go to a new test, a new state assessment called the Atlas, and it's going to be a great test for our state. And so we're looking at seeing if there's a possibility that we can also allow students maybe who don't participate at a school or something like that to also maybe take the state assessment if they don't have another way to take any of the other norm reference tests.
Okay. Okay, perfect. So I will give Dr. Smith a break for a second and pop back over to Dr. Wolf. Your research often takes a look at things like those test results that he was talking about. So what can you tell us about how EFA programs affect measures like student performance or other achievement? And what does the research show in terms of the impact a program like this can have?
Sure, Emmy. So we have to draw on research on school voucher programs because education freedom accounts are so new that we don't have evaluation specifically of them. But basically, they are so much more adaptable and dynamic that if we see any positive results from school vouchers, which can only be used for private school tuition and fees, if we see positive results for those, clearly EFAs are going to deliver even better results for parents because they're fully customizable. As Dr. Smith mentioned, the funds can be used for a wide variety of educational products and services to customize a child's education. And so it really, I think the best comparison, the best analogy that I've heard is that school vouchers are like a flip phone. You know, they're a neat way to do one thing, make a phone call. But education freedom accounts are like a smartphone. You can do all kinds of things on a smartphone. You can do all kinds of educational things with the resources in an education freedom account. So it really is incorrect to say that the Learns Act established a school voucher program. It didn't. It established education freedom accounts, which is a specific type of education savings account, very customizable. But the research is grounded on private school voucher programs, and that research is overwhelmingly positive. There are 18 rigorous experimental evaluations of the effects that private school choice programs have on test score outcomes. And 11 of those 18 show clear positive effects overall for students. 5 of them show positive effects for at least some students, some subgroups of students participating, and only 2 of the studies show negative effects. And both of those studies, I led one of them, but both of those studies were of a very poorly designed program in Louisiana that had regulations, very inappropriate regulations built into it that scared away quality providers. We're fortunate with the EFA program and the Learns Act that we learned from the mistakes of our neighbors to the south and didn't include those same regulations. And so we can be confident. I mean, we've already seen it. Almost 100 private schools in our state agreed to participate in the EFA program in the very first year. That's way more. That's over half. I think it's almost 3/4 of the private schools that were eligible to participate, whereas in Louisiana, only 1/3 of the private schools eligible to participate participated in that program. So we have good research to suggest that participating in the Education Freedom Account program is going to deliver better learning outcomes for kids.
And does the research say anything about parent satisfaction or any concerns that families may have when participating in these programs, specifically the EFA program? But I know that you mentioned it has to be based on the voucher studies.
Yeah, so the parent satisfaction rates are overwhelmingly positive for private school choice programs. And another thing that's very interesting is they are positive, especially for the aspects of private school choice, parental empowerment that that the programs are designed to enhance. So parents express especially high levels of satisfaction with the academic program and academic challenge that their child experiences in a choice program. They express very high levels of satisfaction with safety and order and discipline in private schools of choice. They express satisfaction with the opportunity to choose a school with a distinctive culture and faith tradition. that they can't get in public schools. The areas in which they're less satisfied make a lot of sense. It's things like buildings and elaborate, facilities. The parents aren't as satisfied with those, but they also say that those don't matter as much as those other factors: academic rigor, safety, the opportunity to access a faith-based education for their child. So the evidence on parent satisfaction is overwhelmingly positive, and it's positive on things that really matter to parents.
That's amazing. So the studies show growth in academic achievement, parent satisfaction, all of that. So mostly positive things, which is what we like to hear. Dr. Smith, just for anyone who may have joined us late, could you repeat some of the eligibility, or I'm sorry, all of the eligibility requirements for this school year, the 23 school year?
Yeah, absolutely. First, before I say that, isn't it great to have smart people in the room? I mean,
Makes it
it's
much
just cool.
easier.
It's just cool to have Dr. Wolf in the clinic. I'm just saying, it's pretty cool. Anyway, yes. So eligibility for this year. So it is basically you have to have an identified IDEA disability, be homeless, foster care, active military, have been enrolled for the last school year in an F-rated school or level 5 district, or be a first-year kindergartner.
Okay, perfect. And then you said that enrollment period is probably going to go through the first couple weeks of January, and then you'll shut it down for this year. Okay. Right. And then will the dollar amount that is given to families change in the coming years?
It will, not by much, but it will, because it's based on the foundation funding that the state gives the public school. And so the LEARNS Act provides for 90% of that funding. And so next year, we think it's going to be right around 6,800. So just a little shy of $200 more than it was this year.
Okay. And then we were talking about parent satisfaction. What have you heard from parents that are already enrolled in the program? What's been like the biggest challenge for them, whether in applying or participating? And then what's kind of the most common questions that you get?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, as Dr. Wolf was mentioning, that the biggest thing we've heard was thank you. Thank you for allowing giving us an opportunity and giving us a chance that we wouldn't have had otherwise. And so that's been a real positive, and it kind of drives us a little bit on those days when things are going kind of crazy, to know that you really are helping families with the choice and empowering them to help build their families and giving their kids an awesome opportunity. Certainly this year wasn't without its hiccups, and any first year as it was. But I think a little bit of the challenges and the technology challenges, and just trying to get everybody in, and that some of the applications, and I think Class Wallet was a brand new thing. Class Wallet's that fund. That's how we distribute the funds to the schools this year. I think getting registered for that, just getting everybody in the system. I think there were some minor challenges, nothing super big, like, oh my gosh, where the wheels fell off. But I will have to definitely give props to our team, because even in those challenging moments, they took the pit stop, we changed the tires, and we got the car back in the race relatively quickly. And we're able to meet the demand without a lot of stoppage. And so we had a great team working on this in a relatively short amount of time. But for the most part, I would say it was a positive experience for both the schools and the families, from what we're hearing. And we're kind of doing our own little mini research study right now, satisfaction study, to just find out some things that that parents and schools say, hey, if you could just fix this or make this a little smoother or help us out a little bit, we would appreciate that. And a lot of that just some technical things that just to make the process go more efficient, to maybe communicate a little bit more clear about how to do things, when to do things. So I think, so for the most part, I think that's where most of parents were this year.
That's great. And you had mentioned Class Wallet. So I know that you said that is how parents get the funding. Can you kind of describe that just a little bit more, like big picture? Like, is it a system where parents can choose how to direct their EFA funding, or kind of how does that work? Because I know you mentioned it's not a reimbursement, so the parents don't receive those funds directly.
Yeah, so Class Wallet is basically, like I said, it's kind of I'm trying to look at it. It's like a debit card. If you want to look at that, it's like you're going to tell them to pay, you're telling Class Wallet to pay somebody. So the process is relatively simple. So basically what happens once you're approved and you're verified that you have enrolled in a private school this year, then what you do is you'll set up your Class Wallet account. When you set up your Class Wallet account, every quarter, a portion of the EFA funding goes into your account. And so at that point, then the school sends an invoice to the families. The family uploads that invoice into Class Wallet. We do our little magic and verify everything, make sure everything's right. And at that point, we approve the invoice and the money is paid directly to the school. So really, all a parent really needs to do is, number one, set up the Class Wallet account once they're approved, and then upload the invoice that the school gives them. So we're trying to make that process relatively seamless and as smooth as possible.
Okay. So, it's kind of like a marketplace, I guess. So do you have a sense of how that's going to work for homeschoolers next year? Like
Yeah.
everything will need to be approved by you all first before they submit the invoice, or how does that work?
Yeah, there's actually two pieces of Class Wallet. There's the marketplace, which functions like an Amazon. Like, you're going to put stuff in a cart and then you're going to buy it. And so there's that part for your bigger suppliers, like a Staples or something, when you're buying technology and some things like that. The other part of that is called what they call direct pay. And that's the invoice piece, where you provided a service, they're going to give you an invoice, and then we're going to pay that provider. So when it comes to homeschool or other people who are going to take advantage of education service providers, then the first thing they've got to do is we have to approve the service providers. And there's going to be a process for that. We're still finishing up some of the applications, some of the details of exactly what that means. Hope to have all that done here in the next 4 to 6 weeks, as far as what that process will be to include providers. And so when a homeschool student or another family is using the services of a tutor or an education service provider, then what they'll need to do is have that provider upload or onboard onto Class Wallet, so then they can select them. So the family can get onto Class Wallet, select that provider, and then get the invoice and pay them directly. So there's the bigger things, the bigger ticket items, which would be more a marketplace. And that's more, again, that's just kind of a shopping cart. You put it in there, we approve your shopping cart. The other side of that is more of a face-to-face type services, where then they'll upload an invoice and we'll pay that vendor directly.
Okay, so y'all will have vendor applications that people
Yes,
can fill out for like therapies and tutoring, things like that.
absolutely.
Okay, that's amazing. Would there be any way to cover something like an educational field trip for homeschool students? And if so, how would a family kind of go about getting that approved beforehand?
Yeah, that's a great question. We're actually working on all those details now, trying to figure out exactly how to make so, because again, we want to provide the greatest options for the most number, for the greatest number of people. And make sure that that we're providing a great educational experience for students in Arkansas. And so we're going to work on that. I can't really have a specific answer for that question right now. I will tell you that we're working with some of the homeschool families and some of the homeschool advocacy groups. In fact, we're on a big conference call tomorrow to really talk through how we can best serve the homeschool community and what we can do to provide these services and to make sure that it's a good fit for homeschool families, because we know that's an important part of the Arkansas education system. And so we're going to keep working on it. We're going to do our very best to make this program functional, as well as allowing for the most opportunities for students who are homeschooled.
Okay, great. Well, that's exciting. And then we did have a question come in that was asking to clarify what a first responder means. Is that something that will be defined later, or?
We're looking at those definitions and kind of finishing up some of those things. Most of that will be in the rules that we hope to come out here in the next month or so. I mean, at least they'll be out there for public comment, so everybody gets a chance to peek at them and look at it. We certainly know that it's your firefighters, your EMTs, some of those types. How far we're going to expand that? We're looking into code to see if there's some some definitions for first responders, and so we'll have that specifically probably in the next 4 to 6 weeks.
Okay, awesome. Well, I'm sure we'll ask again.
That's okay.
Dr. Wolf, can you tell us more or less what we see nationally in other states' programs in terms of processing requests for expenditures? Like, how have they worked it out in their various systems for making sure that the EFA expenses are approved?
Yeah, most states that have EFA type programs, there are about a dozen now. They are gravitating toward the class wallet approach that Dr. Smith described. Now, Arizona is Arizona, so Arizona insists on being different, and they rely on they use an actual debit card. It's actually more difficult to audit and monitor expenses in that case, but they argue it provides maximum flexibility for parents. But most states are choosing the class wallet, where providers and educational products can be pre-approved for purchase, like Dr. Smith described, and I think it has big advantages over the actual debit card, and I'm pleased that Arkansas is taking that approach.
Good. Well, the smart people have approved. So,
Hey,
um,
Amy, can I add something to what Dr. Wolf said? The governor and the legislature were actually very, very smart in the way they developed the LEARNS Act, as far as especially where the funding goes, because they were very careful to make sure that it wouldn't just get out of control. Because you can see maybe some of the other states where spending has really kind of ballooned on them a little bit. And they put some language in the LEARNS Act that allows for some accountability and a great deal of accountability for spending and transparency and spending taxpayer money. And so we are one of the only states that has provided that level of transparency and accountability to the public. And so again, as Dr. Wolf was saying, I think it's a great, they built a good foundation for the program so that it can serve the students of Arkansas, but also serve that in a very fiscally responsible way.
yes, yes. And while it's serving those students, like Dr. Wolf mentioned earlier, it is customizable with the allowable expenses and everything that EFAs allow for. And we have seen educators really build different kinds of schools based on the needs of their local community in places like Arizona and Florida. And then, Dr. Wolf, what has that looked like and what has it produced in terms of growth and innovation?
Yeah, so we're just seeing a lot of innovation in states that have already fully implemented EFA type programs. Microschooling, of course, has been very popular since the pandemic. It was one of the few ways to effectively educate children during the pandemic when schools were locked down. Now, fortunately, we in Arkansas, we're an in-person state. We opened up in person as soon as it was viable to do so, but a lot of states stayed closed for a long period of time. And so the schooling that took place was these micro schools, where basically families would get together, they would hire one teacher, they would sort of rotate what house they were in. That teacher provided the instruction, and that teacher sort of pulled together and customized an educational program for the students. So what EFAs do is they easily facilitate that kind of arrangement, where a teacher who's very versatile and dynamic in their ability to connect with a wide range of students can basically become an approved vendor for educational services in our state, and can lead a micro school. Or hybrid homeschools is another model that's emerging in EFA states. And what a hybrid homeschool is basically a child receives several days of instruction in their home in traditional homeschool terms, but also receives some days of instruction and extracurricular activities and such in a brick and mortar private school. And so that brick and mortar private school can be an education provider with an EFA, and the funds that are remaining after the partial tuition is paid for that can be used to support products and services for the homeschooling experience. So basically, the EFA approach is an ideal funding mechanism for the wide variety of educational models that parents are embracing in the wake of COVID. And these are innovative approaches. Many of them are sort of small scale and very personally focused on customizing education for children. And of course, an EFA also can be used simply to pay private school tuition and fees at an established private school. It can do that if a parent decides that's the best use of the funds for their child. But it also has the versatility to fund education through all of these other schooling models that have emerged.
So truly customizable by being able to use, different locations, different models, even throughout one student's education experience. Before we switch back to Dr. Smith with some questions, I want to remind everyone that you can use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to submit any questions that you have. And then if they are not answered during this call, you can reach out to our office at info@thereformalliance.org, and we would be happy to help you with that. But changing gears just a little bit back to the Education Freedom Account program, some of the technical questions about that. What happens, Dr. Smith, once families are enrolled in the program and they want to change schools, either at semester or at the end of the year, or maybe mid-semester?
Yeah, absolutely. It's that kind of that customizable approach that Dr. Wolf was talking about, because again, you don't know, right? I mean, there's just times that you think something's going to work, and it just maybe wasn't exactly what you thought it was, or maybe there's a program that fits better, a new program at a different place that fits better, that wasn't available at the time that you joined the school. So again, making the program flexible and accessible, and so basically what needs to happen, it's a pretty simple process. It's basically notify the school that you're withdrawing, notify the ADE that you're withdrawing. And at that point, there will be, we'll kind of, again, do some figuring and then make sure the funds that go to your previous school, the right amount goes to that school. And then if you have anything left, depending on where you are in that quarter, will then be available to, for the new school. And so it's really just about communication. It's communicating with the schools, both the one that you're leaving and the one that you're going to, and also communicating with us to let us know that you're planning on making that transfer. And then we'll kind of take care of all the details behind the scenes to make sure, again, that's a very smooth process.
Okay, great. So families are allowed to do that at any point in time during the school year.
That's correct.
Okay. We touched on this a little bit earlier, but if families are not changing schools at the end of this year, do we have a sense of what will be required in terms of them renewing their scholarship? I know you said that they don't have to reapply, but will they have to submit any paperwork, or will it just be a matter of confirming that they want to stay in the program with you all?
Primarily just confirming. They'll log into their account. We'll have a section there for the 24-25 school year. And there'll be a couple of questions, but basically I still want to participate in the program. We may ask a couple other just demographic type questions just to kind of help make sure we understand who the family is and what their needs are so that we can plan better in the future. So maybe kind of like mini survey type questions, but for the most part, they won't be submitting new documentation.
Okay. And then if they're looking for these other options, different private schools, or when the allowable expenses expand, is there a list of the private schools and their locations, or some of the education providers that are going to be approved vendors somewhere?
Yes, so you can go right now to the Education Freedom Account page on the Department of Education's website, and it has the list of approved schools. It's like Dr. Will said, almost 100 of them, which is exciting, considering that we started this thing in June. But yeah, so that's there. As we start developing our list of approved providers, they'll also be on the website. You can also find those on Class Wallet. So once you get in there, you'll find those providers. You'll be able to select providers on Class Wallet as well, those that have been approved providers. So you'll be able to find them from both places.
Okay, and I know that you said that you are still developing the vendor application, but right now I know that schools can apply to become approved to participate in the program.
Mm-hmm.
Where would they find that application?
In the same place. So again, the Educational Freedom Account webpage on the Department of Education's website, it has both the family application and the school application, along with the handbook that gives you all the details of how and why and the what. So it answers a lot of those frequently asked questions that families and schools had. And we've got that up there for people to ask, to look at, to review. And certainly if they have any questions, they can call our office. More than happy to answer any questions or walk them through the process.
Um, That's a lot. You guys are doing a lot in your office, so I think that's great. And then at the end of the school year, what happens if they have any unspent EFA funds in their account? Do they roll over, or what happens there?
So this year, things are a little different. This year, any unused money that after June 30th, I believe, goes back to the state. So it kind of goes back into the big pot. Starting next year, though, if there's money left over quarter to quarter, year to year, that money just rolls over. So you can, if you have money left over, you can use it for the next year. So as students progress through their educational journey, usually expenses expand. And so, a parent using that wisely could, really prepare for greater needs when they get into middle school or high school or some of those types of things, and they'll have that money available. So it will roll over as long as you're in the program.
Okay, perfect. And then when do students phase out of this program?
So if you choose to go back to a public school, that's one way to exit the program. If you graduate, or if you turn 21. And so, or after that year after you turn 21. So if you're still in school when you turn 21, when you finish that school year, that would be the time that you phase out. Or if there's some issues, which I don't expect to have, but if a family abuses the program or there's some misappropriations or anything like that, then obviously that would kick you out of the program.
Okay. Um, And then just quickly back to the EFA funding, if their EFA funding exceeds the tuition costs, they can use it on other approved expenses, right? So if they're in a private school and then next year the expenses expand, they can use it for tutoring or therapies if their private school tuition is already covered by those funds.
Correct. So the first thing we ask them to do, and the schools help us with this, is make sure their tuition is paid. That's just a responsible thing to do for the school, as well as for the family. And so if there's money remaining, then yes, anything that's under the eligible expenses, they can spend their remaining funds on.
Okay. Um, And then Dr. Wolf, we talked a lot about the positives that we've seen from school choice, these education freedom for families. And can you speak to any downsides or challenges that other states have seen, or the impact on the quality of public school education, traditional public schools, anything like that?
Sure. So in many cases, families are challenged by participating in this program. Many families have simply accepted the default assignment of their child to a neighborhood public school. And with parental school choice and the empowerment that comes with it, also comes the responsibility of parents to learn about these schooling options and schooling providers. So they need to become informed education consumers by participating in this program. And so that's a challenge for parents, but obviously, most parents are up for that challenge. A second thing is the schools themselves, the private schools really need to be welcoming of these families. There have been a few cases where the private school culture was not very welcoming to families using school vouchers or tax credit scholarships or the like. And that's really sad because the whole goal is for all of the students for whom their parents think a particular school is a good fit for that child, to be welcomed into that school community and that school culture. And so those are two things that people have to be aware of, that The parents need to educate themselves on their options. They really, if they plan to send their child to a brick and mortar private school, they really need to visit multiple schools and put their eyes on the operations of the schools and really kind of get firsthand information about what it's going to be like for their child to attend the school. And for private schools, they need to be very open and welcoming of these families and welcome them into their school community. Now, what we see overwhelmingly in research on what happens to students who remain in public schools is that competition from these types of school choice programs leads to better outcomes in public schools. There have been 29 rigorous studies of this question. 27 of them find positive effects uh, of competition from new or expanding private school choice programs on the test scores of students who remain in public schools. So Stanford economist Caroline Hawksby coined the term, school choice is a rising tide that lifts all boats. So it benefits the families that are participating in the choice program, but it also has spillover benefits through competition on public schools delivering a better education for the students who choose to remain in that educational environment.
That's amazing. So everyone will benefit hopefully from this in years to come as kids are able to find that education environment that fits their specific needs and then lifts all boats. um With that in mind, Dr. Smith, your office really did some amazing work getting the application process up and running on a very short timeline last summer, like you were talking about, launched June 19th. And then given that you've had a chance to reflect on that experience, do you envision the process or the application changing much for next school year? And then can you give us any hint on when applications might open for the 24-25 school year?
Yeah, and first of all, again, I want to just give kudos to the team because again, they did a phenomenal job putting all this together, and again, in a relatively short amount of time, they did a lot of great work. And um, so as we move forward, I don't anticipate a lot of changes. I mean, there'll be some technical changes, just some the way the website works a little bit, maybe the questions you have to answer, some of those types of things, but the application process won't change much. You'll log in, you'll answer the questions, you'll provide proof of eligibility for the criteria, and then we'll kind of go from there and go through the approval process. We hope um, that somewhere mid-February, don't hold me to that too much, but that's what we're working towards. Mid-February, early March launch date for the year 2 applications. That kind of fits the private school enrollment cycle. You're right there in that spring, and so we want to try to match that as best we can. So more than likely, it'll go, let's just say mid-February till end of May. Probably take a little break right there for June, just to kind of let the dust settle, let the schools kind of plan their enrollment, kind of figure out what they need, those kind of things, and then open it back up in July for summer move-ins, people who maybe weren't really sure of what they were going to do, some of those late arrivers, and then probably keep it open again, probably till mid-January, like we would this year.
Okay, and do you mind just reiterating once again
Yeah,
those eligibility requirements for this year and then kind of how it expands
sure.
next year as well?
So this year, again, it's homeless, foster care, IDEA, a disability, a verified disability, Succeed Scholarship, if you were on the Succeed Scholarship this year, active military, if you were attended a F-rated school or level 5 district last year, or if you were first-year kindergarten. That's this year. The next year, that expands to veterans, reservists, first responders, law enforcement, or a D, F, or level 5 student, as well as first-year kindergartens.
Okay, and then I'm not sure if you mentioned this earlier, but what is a level 5 school?
It's a level 5 district, and so that basically says it's like an F-rated school, but just the district. Into districts, it needs some support. It's in support, and where the Department of Education's really working with it to work on its improvement and so that it continues to provide or will provide quality education for the students in that area.
Okay. And then I know a lot of people have contacted our office. They're super excited about this. They are, wanting to participate as soon as possible. And then we have a question a lot that says, if you are not eligible in like this year or next year, can they apply now to be first in line for the year that they're eligible?
Unfortunately not, because of the eligibility requirement. So again, probably the I guess February of 2025, when everybody's eligible in the state of Arkansas, that's when that's when everybody can jump on the ship and get in there. Again, at this time, the goal is for everybody to be a part of the program. If they want to be a part of the program and they want to participate in the EFA program and make choices other than the traditional public school, then the intent is for everybody to have that option.
And we are excited for them. We want everyone to be in that best environment for them. And then
Absolutely.
kind of in that same vein, Dr. Wolf, do you mind discussing some of the false information that's been spread about the EFA programs in general, and then what those facts are?
Yeah, so there are lots of claims made about private school choice programs, including education freedom account style programs that just aren't supported by the evidence. There are claims that they have a history of being instruments of racism and racial segregation. That's not true. There was a time back in the dark days of Jim Crow where some southern states talked about a school voucher as a way to maintain segregated schools. But private schooling and private school choice also was a major factor in providing quality education to African Americans in the South during Jim Crow, when they were prohibited from attending the high quality public schools. There was a set of private schools called the Rosenwald schools, and they served African American students for free in the South during the Jim Crow period. And the research on what happens in the modern era when people participate in choice programs is that it actually better integrates the schools, because as parents make choices, as they choose schools based on what's the best fit for their child, they actually end up creating a richer and more diverse racial and ethnic mix of students, but they're all unified by the desire to be in a particular school that has a certain focus, that has a certain culture, that's a good fit for the child. So certainly, one of the myths is that school choice is segregating. It's not. It's integrating. A second myth is that school choice destroys public schools. I mean, I already talked about how the evidence suggests that the public schools perform better and deliver better results for kids when they face competition from choice. And related to that is the claim that private school choice programs steal funds or empty out the coffers of private schools. Deny resources to public schools that they need to be effective, and that's not the case either. As Dr. Smith described, the education freedom accounts are funded by just a portion of the amount of money that the state would spend on a given public school student in the public schools. There are other strands of resources that come into neighborhood public schools that would not be diverted by an EFA. So actually, our public schools will have more resources to spend on educating fewer students when this program is implemented. And that's one reason why they're able to deliver better results for kids under these programs. So those are probably two of the biggest myths. I think a third big myth that's very important to comment on in this day and age is the claim that school choice will destroy our democracy. And the argument there is that only government-run public schools can instill civic values in students of tolerance, political knowledge, political participation, voluntarism, and community spirit. But we see from national studies that civic knowledge is very low in our country, where about 90% of students are educated in public schools. And what we see in micro studies is that private schools actually are quite effective in instilling civic values in students. And also part of the whole idea of parental choice and family choice helps support the idea of representative democracy and celebration of diversity and participation in one's community. So far from undermining our democracy, extending freedom and choice to families in education actually enhances and strengthens our democracy and our civic culture.
So everything is going to improve.
But it's work. It's work. Like I said, it's,
Yeah.
Parents have to do their job. Dr. Smith and his team have to continue to do the amazing job that they've done implementing this program in such a short period of time. And not independent sector organizations, nonprofit organizations like the Reform Alliance needs to continue to do its great work supporting parental awareness and parental choice. So there's a lot of work to do. But when that work is done, we can expect strong positive results from the implementation of this program.
That's amazing. And of course, our team is still happy to support in any way we can with parental engagement and things like that. I want to thank you both so much for being here tonight. And I just wanted to ask if you wanted to share any final thoughts or anything that you think would be helpful for parents that we haven't directly asked you. And Dr. Smith, I'll just start with you.
All right. I think the biggest thing is I think that Dr. Wolf even mentioned is parent education. And parents need to understand what the EFA program is, what the benefits are, what options they have, and we're going to do our best to communicate what those options are, communicate the process to parents so that they can be the most informed that they possibly can. And if you have a question, ask. I think that's probably the best thing, and because there is a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of stuff swirling out, and everybody's got their opinions about good and bad and what it should be and what it shouldn't be. So I think it's just important for parents to educate themselves and then to ask questions. And like, I know you guys are willing to answer those questions. I know if they can call my office and we'll be happy to answer their questions, even if they're hard questions. And we'll be more than happy to say, hey, this is what the program does. This is the options that you have here. Here where here's some places that you can go, and and so just to be as helpful as we can so that parents can make the best choice for their families, because that's what this is all about.
Yes, absolutely. And then Dr. Wolf, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I just want to say that the Education Freedom Account program, it's this rich combination of a bold and innovative policy arrangement that was very carefully designed and carefully informed by the experiences of several other states. So it's not like we're the first to do this, but we certainly are on the cutting edge, and we've benefited from the experiences of other states that were a little bit ahead of us in timeliness. And we put together this package, this really exciting program that's going to grow dramatically into a big and bold parent empowerment program.
Awesome. Absolutely. And thank you both again for being here. And I want to thank all the participants for joining us tonight. We hope that this has helped improve some of the understanding for the EFA program. If you have any further questions or we weren't able to get to your question tonight, please again email us at info@thereformalliance.org. And you will also be getting a participant survey after this event, and there is a space in there to ask any questions you may still have. And we will look into those answers and get back to you at the email that you provide. And then thank you all again and have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.